Species. Unite.
So this relationship to ourselves, to other people, to other animals, whether farm animals, wild animals, it's very bizarre how we have gotten so twisted in what we expect and what we feel entitled to over here in the global north.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Novogratz. This is Species Unite. We have a favor to ask. If you liked today's episode and you have a spare minute, could you please rate and review Species Unite on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts? It really helps people to find the show. This conversation is with Katherine Baxter. Katherine is the CEO for African Network for Animal Welfare, ANAW. ANAW works to advance the welfare of animals, humans, and the environment by facilitating mutually beneficial and reciprocal exchanges between the United States and Africa. Hi, Katherine.
Hi, Beth. So good to see you, and thanks so much for having me.
So good to have you here. I want to start with, because I just find it very cool, and I'm a little jealous, that you grew up with two veterinarian parents. So can you just go back and start there and like what that was like?
I did. And I do feel very fortunate for that now, more so now than I think I did at the time. I wish I had appreciated it more when I was a kid. I grew up in northern Colorado, a lot of fields and, the rivers and bald eagles nesting in the cottonwood trees and meadowlarks. And it was a really rich ecological environment. I grew up in what was basically like an animal rescue, because if people couldn't afford to pay to fix their cat's leg that had gotten broken, of course, my mom would do the procedure, and then we would have a new cat. Or if there was a horse that someone, let's say there was a horse that was lame that someone wasn't going to invest in fixing, my dad would provide the care, and then we would rescue the horse. And so it was just a lot of limp animals, and my two sisters and I running around in the fields of northern Colorado. And I think I was able to develop, just a deep understanding of our interrelationship with other living things, and also our obligation to care for other creatures. And of course, I realized that is not something that every child gets to grow up kind of immersed in, but it isn't lost on me now how much that shaped my trajectory and all the kind of cares and convictions that have come to define me personally and professionally.
I think so many people grow up with such a disconnect from nature. And unless you connect with nature and connect with other species, it's very easy to just kind of stay, just to not even, it's not even about not caring. It's about not even being conscious of or aware that there's like lives and all these things going on around you. And when you grow up with it kind of in like with you, where it's not only an obligation, but it's just life, you're right. You grow up with life all around you constantly. Mm-hmm. It shapes you. It's not surprising that where you ended up. Was your family vegetarian or vegan or meat eating or what?
So my dad actually grew up on a dairy farm in northern Pennsylvania, kind of Amish country, and we were not vegetarian. He grew up very, very poor, but with a deep respect and reverence for these animals that were he and his family's livelihood. We're not vegetarian, but meat was like a very special occasion. And it wasn't something that you took for granted. It was definitely something that was like, oh, we're eating something that was alive, something that we would otherwise be caring for. And it was probably when I moved, when I went to college when I was 17, that then I became vegetarian, just because it was my choice. And it had always kind of weirded me out anyway, the idea of eating other animals that I had grown up with that were friends to me. And so then I think, and then it was actually when I moved to Scotland that I went fully vegan. People get there in different ways.
What sparked that? Like, how did that happen in Scotland?
My partner at the time was vegan, and it was basically just my milk and my coffee, to be honest. That was the only that was the only thing that I hadn't really been able to kick, and to find a replacement that didn't leave me wanting something different. And I think I just stopped making excuses and recognized my own hypocrisy. I mean, I tried to be gentle with myself. So just recognizing that I would get there when I could, not beating myself up as a hypocrite if one day a week I put some dairy milk in my coffee, and I've really tried to not do anything in very absolute terms in my life. Black and white thinking is something I try to just be wary of wherever I encounter it. But having someone else who just was, putting non-dairy milk in their coffee in the morning kind of got me over that final hurdle.
That's a really good way to look at it in terms of it's not all or nothing.
Yeah,
it's reduced. It's less than. It's whatever you can show up with. And if it's better than the day before, that's fantastic.
Exactly, right. Everyone's on their own journey, in this regard, and obviously the choices we make around food are so important and really do make an impact and can lead to concrete changes. But we're not going to get people there by bullying them.
So you're in Scotland because you're getting your master's and then your PhD.
Yes. Yeah. So I always approach the issue of the exploitation of other animals as a social problem. So I kind of went in, I studied philosophy, when I was an undergrad, and then I ended up moving to Edinburgh to do my master's degree at the University of Edinburgh. And then I was pretty lucky. I got a scholarship to stay and do my PhD. And I got to just think deeply about these questions of how do we change and transform social, economic, human systems to be less harmful, exploitative, and sort of just inherently disrespectful of other living things, of other life forms, of the natural environment. And the tension that kind of became central to my research, and I've carried that through to how I think about these issues now, is sort of, when we're thinking about these issues on a global scale, and when we have global aspirations, right, towards ending the exploitation of animals, or protecting natural environments, or addressing climate change, educating, making sure kids are literate and have access to education. These are all global aspirations that take shape in very specific, local, particular ways, right? So this kind of dialogue between these universal goals that we have, and then how those are going to show up and instantiate in specific cultures with specific people, and also, the context of specific relationships between people and other animals. That, I think, is going to be the tension that really defines the success or failure of this movement to protect animals.
And beyond protecting animals, right? To protecting the planet, to creating less human suffering as well. And
exactly. Yeah. And to not have it adversarial, I think that's something too, is so often it's like, we can't talk about human well-being without it seeming like it's somehow at odds with protecting other animals in the environment. And so working against this adversarial dynamic and recognizing how actually, if any of us suffer, we all suffer. And if any of us thrive, we all thrive. And really trying to come up with concrete and practical ways to anchor what that can seem like a very untethered kind of academic or intellectual way of framing these issues. So then the challenge is to find specific ways to create healthy and flourishing human-animal environment relationships in the world. And that's what I've been trying to do.
It's true. And I say this a lot. I say, how we treat anything is how we treat everything. Mm-hmm. It's so interconnected. Yet it's so great in theory when you say that, mm-hmm. but it's very hard in application when you're like, when you're talking about a hamburger. It's much harder to paint the picture of it. And mm-hmm. so will you talk about how you got here through that lens, how you got to where you are now?
Absolutely. So, and just to emphasize, I completely agree with you that I think the way we treat other animals is often indicative of how we treat ourselves So like, again, starting there with that relationship. And for me, that started early. So I would say meditation and having a different relationship to my own mind. But so that kind of got me part of the way there. And then, like you said, the challenge was, okay, how do I do this in practical, concrete ways? And so then from my PhD research, I was also doing a lot of work with displaced youth and refugee youth, actually, and kind of looking at, again, these relationships between young people, animals, and the environment in the context of crises, where it's really, really, really hard to think beyond this adversarial dynamic of needs and how you meet immediate needs whilst also thinking about longer term implications and trajectories. And it's kind of funny because it's only been over the last few years that I've looked back and I thought, I guess it's like creating alliances among the vulnerable is sort of how I would describe a lot of my work and like what's carried me through my career. And now fast forward to today, where I moved back from Scotland after about 7.5 years of kind of being, I was there and bouncing around the world doing other work at the same time. But I came back to Colorado and I got an interview for this amazing job, which is now I'm currently the CEO of an organization called the African Network for Animal Welfare, the USA headquarters. So we have a sister organization in Kenya called ANAW that's headquartered in Nairobi. And the emphasis is very much on animal welfare and conservation, but also with this focus on communities and how to bring communities into this picture, how to unite the needs and consideration of animals with people.
Let's talk about some of these programs because I love hearing about coexistence programs in other places outside the US, because we in the US have such a resistance to so many of them, massive resistance. And our stakes are so low compared to other places. And so it makes no sense how much resistance we have in terms of what our stakes are compared to places like East Africa, where the stakes are human lives or your entire crop for the year, versus ours are maybe a cow that gets killed by a wolf and the rancher is reimbursed. And but it's a much different ballgame for us to be like so anti it.
We have so much to learn here in the US, I think, from other countries, other cultures, and how they have addressed this question of coexistence with other animals. And so in addition to, the work that we're trying to do to support these initiatives that promote coexistence in East Africa, also trying to bring the knowledge, right, and sort of indigenous and African perspectives on conservation and human-animal coexistence back to the US to help inform and create a conversation here that can really benefit from, I think, the wisdom that they're bringing to answering this really hard question. Because in the US, we're just so, like you said, the stakes are so low for us. We're so shielded from it. I mean, apart from the squirrel, running around, or the skunk maybe behind your house that's building a den, or, obviously in more rural communities, right, wolves. But we have such an entitlement to the way that we as humans should be able to exist on this planet and in this country. And I have found that entitlement does not exist in the same way in other places, especially East Africa. So to be more specific and to sing the praises of what I would argue are very successful human-animal coexistence initiatives, because we have to celebrate our wins wherever we can find them in this movement. We started a conservation center. My colleague and I, Kehinde Lekalhaile, who is lifelong conservationist, elephant expert. I mean, he helped found Save the Elephants and is Samburu, and just one of the most brilliant people I've ever had the privilege to work with. We started a conservation center in a place called Kasagao in Taita Taveta County in Kenya about 18 months ago. And over the course of those 18 months, what has been accomplished is really just miraculous. So There's a couple projects that I'll just highlight here, and there are others. But the first one I want to talk about, which was kind of our flagship project that we got off the ground, with thanks to a very generous donor here in the US who's become just like a, best friend, and she visits the center regularly. The first project is called the Elephants and Sunflowers Project, which emerged from kind of local folklore that elephants don't eat sunflowers. So Kenya is experiencing a really severe drought, and a lot of the crops have been failing. And on top of the pressures that come about when crops fail, there's also additional pressures where our center is located because of elephant crop predation. Okay, so the center is located in the Tsavo ecosystem, which, if anyone's seen the Obama National Parks documentary, there's a whole episode on Tsavo, and it's absolutely worth a watch. And so there's a huge roaming population of elephants that move through these communities that border the mountain, Mount Kasagao. And as they move, they often will completely destroy people's crops. So maize is their favorite. And that puts people obviously in a really difficult position. And it also creates a lot of animosity and conflict between these local communities, these people, and the elephants. So this project started with 40 farmers, and the idea was to really just test, right? To prove the concept that actually elephants don't like sunflowers. And so if you plant and cultivate sunflowers, then actually you're going to reduce human-elephant conflict, and you're also going to support farmers and these community members by providing a viable crop that not only is drought resistant, which maize and other crops are not, but also the entire plant can be repurposed and used. So it can be fed to livestock, and the seeds can be used. And so it gets better. But that's how it started 18 months ago. Fast forward to today, there are over 900 farmers involved in this project, and this is just over 18 months. Now there is a full sunflower oil press machine that's producing local elephant-friendly, right? So they call it elephant resistance in Swahili, sunflower cooking oil, right? That's owned by a local co-op that's emerged. It's owned by the women who are cultivating these sunflowers. The incidence of human-elephant conflict resulting from crop predation has gone down by more than 95%. We've monitored this all across the 7 villages that are involved. And the whole, what used to be dried up fields of maize and people sleeping on top of, bunkers and all night long trying to make sure that the elephants don't destroy their crops, now are just brilliant yellow fields like on fire with sunflowers. And it's just been remarkable. So we've produced over, the amount of sunflower oil that's been produced is really incredible. The community investment in this project is incredible. And this has all been done by, Kahindi, myself, and a team of 3 very, unfortunately, not very well paid project assistants who have really monitored. And then obviously with the buy-in of the community. So this is continuing on. It's developing at a rate that we're just trying to keep up with. And so that's just, I just feel the need to kind of shout this from the rooftop, because oftentimes, people were pointing towards bees and, there's an elephants and bees project kind of down the road. Well, that wasn't really working. The elephants found ways around it. There's not a lot of yield for with regards to the honey. And it's not addressing these other environmental issues, right? Drought. So this is, for me, an example of a project that is very specific. It's very concrete. It emerged of the specific relationships between these people, the animals that they coexist with, and the kind of ecological and biophysical realities of this part of the world. And now you have this sort of thriving landscape. So that, I think it is doable, and it is possible to put these kind of ideas into practice. So that's one. I can tell you about the other one if you want.
They just stay away, right? They just don't like them. They don't want to be near them, or they don't eat them.
Yeah. So It's not that they won't still pass through, they just won't eat them. And what they tried to do, they had previously thought, oh, maybe if we just plant sunflowers around the maize, then it'll deter. No. So it's really about the elephants just not eating and not having a predilection for the sunflowers. And now that we're piloting it, we're also finding that they don't seem to have any interest in chilies, castor. So there are other things that we're kind of trying to integrate to create, again, a more diversified and robust planting season, just in case. You have to kind of really think about how to, especially with crops and anything in the agricultural sector, you have to think about how to make it robust. So that's our next task. As we have sunflower oil like pouring out of our ears and everyone
but what a
from
success.
Voy it's been amazing. It's a win-win, right? And that's the best case scenario for human-animal coexistence. And in parallel, because the other issue that this community is dealing with is, like I said, there's a severe drought. And so there would be, elephants are very, very good at finding wherever there is water and destroying whatever infrastructure they need to destroy to get to that water. So whether it's underground pipes, whether it's a water storage facility, whether it's, just the last remaining watering hole for 5,000 people, which was the case in Kasagau, right down from where the conservation center is located. And so this other project emerged from this need to figure out a way so that there wasn't this adversarial dynamic that was resulting in conflict towards elephants around water as a resource. So the Elephant Guardians project emerged, and it started with a group of 10 otherwise, they were sort of unemployed young men who really didn't have a source of income, didn't have a livelihood, but wanted to be of some use, to the community. And Kahindi is kind of a mentor for a lot of young people in the community. And so he had the idea of, well, why don't I train these young men to patrol this one particular watering hole that was, again, the last source of water for these 5,000 people living in this area. And if the elephants were able to get into it, just even overnight, I mean, they couldn't use the water anymore, and they would have destroyed it. So so basically then they started doing daily and nightly patrols, and we just provided boots, flashlights, and little kind of slingshots. Absolutely no harm ever done to the elephants. And Kahindi trained these young men in how to peacefully deter the elephants from the watering hole. And and obviously we'd provide sustenance, and we'd sit around and make rice and tea, and they really went on shifts. And for the 3 months until the rains returned, this group of young men, and there was one young woman, which was amazing. I was so happy that there's more and more women now that are involved in this program, were on patrol and protected this water hole for the entire community, gained, a sense of like service and a sense of respect from their community for doing this, learned a tremendous amount about animals, bonded with each other. I spent a lot of time out there on patrols with them at night, and you're sitting up on a rock, and they're just absolutely fearless. There's bull elephant coming, to get into the to the watering hole, and they're over there with their flashlights and slingshots deterring them. And again, it's not that elephants, they have other access, right? They have other ways to get water. So it's not like the elephants are experiencing hardship by not being able to use this particular water resource. It's just that all of the community and the livestock and all of the other animals, everything that relies on this one particular water source would be in dire straits if it were to be destroyed. So that was a huge success. And again, started with 10 people. The Guy Rock Elephant Guardians is what they were called. And now there's over 95 volunteers, men and women, from across 7 different villages. Each of them have their own elephant guardian group, and we've trained them all, provided all the same equipment. We provide sustenance and really a sense of purpose and a sense of I would say, like pride and like proud to be associated and to try to promote this peaceful interaction with elephants.
Well, and with both of them, instead of the elephants coming in and destroying the crops, eating the last crop when the droughts are there, or coming and taking the last watering hole when the droughts are there, when that's not happening anymore, there's also some space to step back and live with the elephants in a way where there's more of an appreciation, I would guess, as opposed to this kind of, as opposed to like a hatred, right? When they're ruining everything.
Exactly. Yeah. And Kehinde is all about this. His goal for all of these projects is just to help people see elephants with the reverence and the respect that he does. Kehinde really just worships elephants. And that is really changing. I mean, we've done a sort of scale of attitudes towards elephants from the beginning to now. And attitudes are remarkably so much more positive towards elephants now than they were at the outset of these projects. And also what's really interesting is even if there was maybe conflict or a sense of fear or animosity towards the elephants before, there was not a sense that they shouldn't be there. There was never this feeling like that they should just be separate, that they should systematically separate and remove these elephants from what is their home, right? I mean, this migratory corridor is their home. And local people would never have even, I think, been able to kind of conceive of that in the way that we do here, let's say in the United States with wolves.
Right,
or,
where we're like all about eminent domain.
Exactly. That's less of an uphill battle when you have, again, already that sort of feeling or this understanding that we have to coexist. So we can either coexist positively or we can exist in a way that's negative and adversarial and a constant struggle. And here, I think in North America and in the United States, I feel like we're not even at a place where most people feel this sort of obligation to respect coexistence and the needs and autonomy of other species. So that's a challenge.
Yeah. We are at such a different starting point. Yeah. We're at a point where like it's all ours, and why are you on our land? And you should be dead.
To put it bluntly, yeah.
And that's why we have so many problems with how we treat other people as well. And it crosses into everything we do, unfortunately.
It's also indicative of a social thing, right? The social phenomenon of how we even think about other people. So this relationship to ourselves, to other people, to other animals, whether farm animals, wild animals, it's very bizarre how we have gotten so twisted in what we expect and what we feel entitled to over here in the global north.
Aside from elephants, you do a lot. You're doing a lot of different programs and work with in 5 different countries. Will you talk about some of the other things that you're doing?
Yeah, I like to sing those 2 projects' praises because they're fairly vivid and also just a positive example. And some of the other work that we're doing is, I would say, equally rewarding, but feels like a bit of more of an uphill battle. So farmed animal advocacy, for example, in East Africa and Africa more broadly. People basically, I would say, have a very practical way of thinking about the exploitation of farm animals. I remember we were doing a focus group with some people in Kenya, in one of the northern cities in Kisumu. And half the people in the focus group didn't even consider fish to be animals, and basically didn't consider chickens to be animals either, or definitely didn't consider them to be capable of suffering. So it's going to be a really uphill battle, I think, to address attitudinally, to address attitudes towards farm animals in Africa, where people, again, do feel this sort of entitlement, and there is a real expectation for meat to be served in all high-profile events. I mean, culturally, it's going to be a challenge. So then again, it's like thinking creatively and systematically as a coalition of different entities working on this, whether in East Africa, South Africa, West Africa, We don't have as many partnerships or as much work going on in Northern Africa. But so there can be this kind of unified way of addressing this so that industrial animal agriculture doesn't seep in and exacerbate all of the, ecological devastation that we know comes with these practices and the egregious animal suffering that comes in tandem. And so that Africa also doesn't become a hub to meet rising demand for animal protein, right? So there's an export market. And one of the findings of our research is that actually there are a lot of Chinese businessmen that are coming into small scale kind of farmers markets and offering a line of credit to farmers if they will adopt more industrialized production practices and therefore at the same time commit to exporting a certain portion of their yields. So it's going to be an insidious challenge. I mean, it is an insidious challenge, but the more we can do to combat it proactively before a lot of this stuff is already entrenched, the better. So that's farm animal advocacy. You can tell I'm quite passionate about that one.
It's a big one, and it's a really tough one too, because as the middle class expands and as people have more money, and a lot of people for the first time ever have like some expendable money, meat is typically the first thing in any country in the world. That's where people go, hey, I have some money, we can afford meat. It's a thing across the entire planet. It's not even cultural, right? Like every country on the planet, they get some money, they get some meat, and then all of a sudden they have heart disease and diabetes and all the other stuff down the road. But
yeah,
it's a big one. That's a big mountain.
Yeah. It's a status thing. And I would say status governs a lot of how things get done in the East African context, especially. And so that's going to be a challenge, but at the same time, I think it's one that even any progress on that front is positive progress. And so one of the things that I'm trying to do is figure out how there's a lot of funding. There's a lot of people on the US and on this side of things that are like, oh, they see Africa as this ticking time bomb for industrial animal agriculture. And they want to invest and find ways to support, efforts against that.
When you first, it's ANAW, is that how you say it? ANAW?
Yeah, ANAW. Don't get me started on the acronym. I would change it in a heartbeat.
When you started, the donkey skin trade there was still a lot more happening than now. First, talk about a little bit about what it is, because a lot of people don't even know it exists. Yes.
So this is a very, I would say, undertold animal welfare issue that is, I think, has had terrible impacts on not only the donkeys that have been slaughtered, but also the women that rely on these donkeys in these communities to fetch water, to be a burden, for better or worse. And so basically, when I first started with ANAW, we were very active in this campaign to ban basically the donkey skin trade. And the strategy that we were taking was to essentially try to petition and lobby the government to close down the 5 abattoirs in Kenya that were primarily responsible for the slaughter and the export of these skins to China. And so what people probably also don't understand is what was driving this systematic slaughter, theft of donkeys from rural pastoralist communities who had no recourse and could not get compensation if their donkeys were stolen and slaughtered, was there's a chemical in the donkey's skin that somehow, I would say, without any basis in reality, has been advertised to have some kind of skin benefit, or it's a cosmetic project. It's called Ijiao, and it's sold in China. And to meet the demand for that, there were people here in Kenya, right, who obviously were trying to make a buck and who were looking after their own livelihoods, who saw the demand and systematically started stealing donkeys, slaughtering them systematically through these 5 abattoirs, and then exporting them to China. And we did successfully lobby, and a lot of this work was done before I came on, so I can't take credit for a lot of the government work that underpinned this. They were closed down. Then, unfortunately, they reopened. And now the issue is spreading. In Tanzania, it's particularly egregious. I would say this problem is rampant in most East African countries and arguably, continent wide, wherever donkeys are relied upon, because there's this market, right? And because China is so heavily invested in Africa's markets and in governance and in infrastructure, people who are desperate, who need income, right, are going to do really whatever it takes in order to be able to make an income. And so what we're trying to do is, again, create these coalitions so that there's more awareness and monitoring of cross-border donkey theft and where that's going. So who's involved, because now it's become almost a little bit more underneath the radar, whereas before it was pretty on the surface, you kind of knew where you needed to put pressure. You knew that these were the 5 abattoirs that we really needed to get closed to address this in Kenya. But now it's more insidious. And so again, a lot of it's monitoring, a lot of it's, including local communities so that they can really understand how this is happening, what's going on, which areas are being most affected. And then also in terms of governance and this is again where this sort of nebulous area of international or supranational law, what can really be done if national governments don't ban these practices, and the Chinese government is certainly not going to ban this practice? What are the levers that we can pull?
I thought the Africa Union came together and did a big ban this past year. Was that not worth a lot?
No. That definitely is worth celebrating. That did happen, and there is a sort of ban in place right now. The issue is that, again, it's gone underground.
Species Unite, one of the things we really have been fighting since the beginning is the fact that we sell donkey skin. We sell Ijao in the U.S., and we're the third biggest importer of Ijao in the world. Why are we selling this? And you can buy it on Amazon, and you can buy it's insanity.
Yeah.
Why isn't it banned? And it would just bring a lot more awareness to the bigger problem. Donkeys around the entire globe are going to go extinct because of this kind of nonsensical Chinese medicine that doesn't actually do anything. But the biggest problem,
the scale. That's what's so
Africa.
Shocking to people is the scale. How many donkeys are being slaughtered? And even though we want to, we like to pick on China, the United States is certainly not free of responsibility and guilt in this equation. And one thing I'm trying to get moving is actually a kind of some kind of petition or lobby or way of bringing attention to Ijao consumption in the US and a consumer awareness campaign. And so maybe that would be something that you and I could even team up on, because I think a lot of people, again, they just don't know. It's this sort of separate thing. It's out of our sphere of sight. How could it be that bad? And there are so many other things like this too, right? So Ijao is one that we know about. It's very much in my sphere of concern because of the work I do in Africa. But think about all the other products, right, that have a similar story. There's some kind of exploitation of animals, ecosystems, underpinning so much of what we consume. So being a responsible consumer it really is important. It does matter. It's not trivial.
And I think we should totally team up on it because we've been working on it for a long time. And we just put together a policy group with people in different districts all over the U.S.
That's amazing. Good. Of course you are. Well, please, cue me in or let me know however I can be of service.
Katherine, this is amazing. You're amazing.
Thanks so much, Beth. I am a huge fan of your work and everything that you're doing. And just thank you for elevating the stories of so many remarkable people that are, fighting on behalf of our animal friends.
Thank you. To learn more about Katherine and to learn more about Africa Network for Animal Welfare, go to our website, speciesunite.com. We will have links to everything. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Species Unite. If you have a spare moment and could do us a favor, please subscribe, rate, review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps people find the show. I would like to thank everyone at Species Unite, including Gary Knudsen, Caitlin Pierce, Amy Jones, Paul Healy, Santina Polke Link, Sam Kosel, Sierra Dolan, and Anna Kollner, who wrote and performed today's music. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day.